Shunyavada, or the concept of emptiness. So, this is a concept in Buddhism which tries to explain the method of achieving nirvana. So, what nirvana is like the heavenly state. It is enlightenment. It is achieving it is achieving unity and complete understanding and conception of the universe. So shunyata, which is voidness, which is nothingness, which is emptiness. Okay, this is a method of showing that all things are without self nature or an independent reality. What this means is that all things exist only in relation to other things. There's nothing in the universe that can stand like by itself in and of itself, right? So no fact, no being, no event, and trying to single anything out as an ideal to be grasped is what it's trying to get us away from. What does this mean? So we think in concepts, we think in words. And what we do when we think in concepts and words is that we have this idea of the thing that we want, and that thing becomes isolated and it becomes a thing which is separate from everything else because it's an idea, because it's not real. And while this helps us function in some ways, it it doesn't really help us understand how things actually are because it's a fiction. What this means is that everything exists in relation to its own opposite. So hence it being a theory of relativity, meaning that pleasure is defined by pain, life is defined by death, to be can't exist without not to be, without the contrast of having one state and then another state. So both are intertwined. So you can't just have, say, enlightenment, because enlightenment implies samsara or the world, as it were. Because it's creating it as an abstraction, and then this abstraction, of course, can only exist in the mind. It can't exist outside of just our conceptualization of it. Nirvana and samsara, they imply each other. You need to have one without the other. You need to have one with the other. You can't have one without the other. And trying to become enlightened implies that the world as it is now has this ability to separate one thing from the rest. Okay? You can't conceive nirvana, the heavenly state, enlightenment, that state without suffering, without having samsara, without having the world, because the point from which you're conceiving stuff is samsara. It's the point from which you're conceiving the world. And then you've already created a duality because the only way that you can think of one is in relation to the other. You can't think of just having nirvana without samsara. Okay, so let's kind of slow this down a bit and then just do what this actually means and what it represents. So nirvana, being in nirvana, that's not a thing. Okay, and understanding this is the way to attain it. What does that mean? I know that's a very paradoxical sentence. Being in nirvana, if you were to understand it, is that you have transcended all pairs of opposites. Okay? You've transcended desire, fear, you, me. You've gone into not even unity, you've gone into non duality. You've gone to the point of not thinking about things in terms of their opposites, in terms of having one thing and then having the other thing. Essentially, what nirvana is it's nothing. Okay? It's just this realization that where you are now only exists because you're thinking about the abstraction of a different place where there is no suffering. Okay? And then because you're thinking about that place, that implies the fact that you're in the place of suffering, as it were. So this distinction creates everything else. It creates the manifestation of the world. Okay? And then what actual enlightenment is, what actual nirvana is stopping to think about things in the abstract way of trying to achieve it, because, as we've already said, you trying to achieve the thing creates it as a concept, and then as a concept, it implies its opposite. So, to achieve this like heavenly state, to achieve nirvana, according to this doctrine of Buddhism, is to just stop thinking about it, period. And then you're in the heavenly state, you're in perfection, because you're not thinking about how the world is imperfect now and then I'm going to get to some perfect heavenly state in the future. Okay, like, because again, as you've already said, when you're thinking about it, you've already created that duality. You've created the duality just by thinking about it. So the place of nirvana is just, it's non-dual, it's without distinction, it's without you even thinking about anything. And this, you can call it as transformation of consciousness. It is not even looking at the problem. It's just giving up on the problem. And then as you've given up on the problem, you're in the perfect heavenly state, as it were, right? But understand that when I say perfect, like, heavenly state, that's just a way for me to talk about it. Really, there's nothing to talk about. It's not a concept to be achieved. It's not a concept that you could have, because every concept, as I said again, has with it its opposite. It creates its negation. It creates the thing opposite from it, because that's the only way that you could understand things, right? So when I say, like, a cup, the cup imply, in order for you to understand what a cup is, you have to understand what a cup isn't. And then, because that's the only way that we can actually communicate about things. But again, we're communicating in concepts, we're communicating in thoughts. So as soon as you give up on the attempt to achieve nirvana, you have achieved nirvana, as it were.